The nonprofit MBA purpose is to provide new business insights and fresh creative ideas for executive directors and their teams that will help them improve their organization. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik. I will be your host for today's Nonprofit MBA podcast, as I've been for the last 6 years. I think this is our 300th episode. I am co-founder of Financing Solutions, and we, just so you know, Financing Solutions is the number one largest provider of lines of credit to small nonprofits throughout the United States. It's a great product. It's really liked a lot. If you think you're unique, that you have uneven cash flow, that's the norm. And that's what a line of credit is really, really good for. And if you're interested in learning more, please visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. And today I'm very excited to be speaking with Tiffany Slater from HR Tailor Made. Today we're going to be talking about mastering the art of difficult conversations in the workplace. Dr. Tiffany E. Slater is the founder and CEO of HR Tailor Made, the human resource solution for small businesses and nonprofits. HR Tailor Made partners with small businesses and nonprofits to provide seamless fractional HR support for their team. Dr. Tiffany has been an HR professional for over 25 years with experience in all aspects of human resources. Tiffany, welcome to today's Nonprofit MBA podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So before we went live, I was going over the topic with, just making sure we have the topic correct, mastering the art of difficult conversation in the workplace. And I mentioned to Tiffany that I have sucked at that in my companies. And I think I still am not good at it. I mean, I've tried to work on it, but it's just such a challenging thing. And Tiffany, why don't you share with our listeners what you said to me?
Yeah, I said that as normal. No one, there's not a perfect scenario where everybody is perfect at having difficult conversations. It's not an easy thing to do, even for the person who has gone through training and does it well. It's just not easy.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of solace when you say that.
Mm-hmm.
The idea, you kind of everybody in this world kind of tends to beat themselves up a lot and think they're the only ones with that problem. And but I would say is, I don't have a lot of employees anymore. I've had as many as 120, and with different companies. This one is a smaller company, and so I don't have to have those type of challenging conversations anymore. If I was in a bigger company, I would tell you that I would really work on it. It's something that really is challenging. So what do you usually hear for people who come to you and say, I really struggle with this? What do you usually hear?
Well, honestly, most people don't say that they struggle with it until there is a situation that they need to address. And it's very uncomfortable for them. And they typically come to us and say, I really need help navigating this situation. They don't typically say, I'm just not really good at this. We know it because they're struggling with having the conversation, or they've avoided having the conversation for several months. And we know at that point, okay, we need to have a conversation so that we can help you navigate this. This cannot continue.
So do you notice, is it the person is not introspective enough? Or is it that they're good at it? I mean, they're okay at it, and it's not that big of a deal.
I think that people are embarrassed to say that it is uncomfortable to have a difficult conversation with someone, because it's one of our responsibilities as a leader. We have to be honest with people, and it's not always comfortable. It's very different when you're at work having to tell someone, I've asked you to do this 5 times, you haven't done it. That's one thing. It's not the same as when you're at home and you're saying it to your spouse or your children. So that I believe is what makes it very difficult because we're having this conversation with someone that we don't have a personal relationship with typically. And I think that's what makes it really uncomfortable. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and it's just hard.
I had to laugh when you said that. Just for our audience, I'm muting myself out a little bit because we have some work being done at the office, and so I don't want everybody to hear any banging and stuff like that. But I had to laugh because if you have kids, there's no filter when you speak of your kids. You say, "I've told you this 5 times already. This is the 6th time." Can you imagine saying that at the workplace?
Exactly. We don't, but there is a way that we can do it and we should do it, to be very honest. And the thing about having difficult conversations with people is I truly believe being honest with people is being kind. Because if they leave your organization never having been told the truth about their performance or their skill level or their lack of attention to detail, they're going to continue to make these same mistakes as they progress in their career. So I would prefer to be the leader who that person can come back to and say, "Thank you for being honest with me. I was able to grow in this area because I actually started paying attention to this, or I took a class so that I could get better at this." We're not asking people to be perfect, right? But we do want to give them enough information so that they can make improvements. And so that they can stop driving everybody crazy.
Yeah, yeah, including me. But they. It's funny. I was reading something today, and I sent it out to both my sons. Well, I have one who's 24, and I have one who's 15. And it was about soliciting and accepting feedback, um, for to have in essence, to have a growth mindset. But you know, I don't know. I think everybody. I'm 59. Uh, I don't know if I think people were much more accepting of feedback a couple decades ago.
Mhm.
Um, I think now it's challenging to give people feedback because they're just not used to it as much. So it makes the communication of it even more important. Would you agree with that?
I definitely agree with that. I think this generation is very challenging for us because they're so. Stephen, you and I grew up in a time where you didn't make the team if you weren't good.
Hmm.
You didn't get a participation award. You got an
Hmm.
award if you were the best or if you beat everybody, right? Well, now we're giving awards to everybody just because they showed up. And in the workplace, that's not effective because if I'm just giving you an award for showing up, to me, that's your paycheck. You get a paycheck for showing up. And if you go above and beyond and you do, great work, then we can talk about the bonus, right? And we need to have conversations with people so that in the workplace they can show up better and as their best self. We want to reward those individuals that are going above and beyond and that are doing great work. So we want to give them that feedback. And on the opposite side, we have to give feedback to those individuals that are not holding up their end of the bargain. And it is difficult to have conversations with people when they don't get it. They don't understand why you're not patting them on the back for just coming to work and looking cute every day. So it is hard, but we still have to do it. And I also think that it's particularly important for nonprofit leaders to be honest with people because we don't have the resources to throw away, like not a penny. So the people that are on our team, we need them to be engaged. We need them to know the importance of our mission and who we serve and why we serve so that they can show up as their best every day. And the only way they can do that is if we have those difficult conversations with people and hold them accountable for the things that they said that they were capable of when they took the job.
Yeah, I think I like today's podcast a lot. I think the number one thing that I want people to get out of today is that probably the number one most important skill that you could develop as a leader is creating a positive environment that allows your people to have a growth mindset. And that's got to be about giving people feedback, and you have to master that. I think that that's probably the most important skill you can control. And it's the biggest way to reduce turnover. It's the best way to listen. There have been times in my life when I've had a company where I would walk in and I didn't like the people I worked with. And you just don't want that, right? You want to feel good about the place that you work at and that you're a leader and that you can control that. And honestly, if you're seeing a lot of turnover, it's not because of the money. It's because of the environment. And you're ready, just so you know, nonprofits have a built-in advantage that for-profit companies don't. And that is you have a cause. And that's the number one thing that people are looking for nowadays. They want to feel
Yes.
like they're making a difference in this world.
Yeah.
And you have that built in. So that's an advantage, but you got to be making sure that you're creating a professional environment. And that's my 2 cents. What do you think, Tiffany?
No, I agree. And that's actually one of the reasons why we work with nonprofit organizations is because of their mission focus and because of their why, if you will. We connect very deeply with that and we get so much enjoyment working with nonprofits because they are serving other people. And so if I, as an outsider, as a consultant, get joy from working with our clients, it could be so amazing if they made sure that on the front end, they hired the right people on their teams. And so that's the first difficult conversation is the interview, right? Just asking those hard questions to make sure that they are aligned with your values and aligned with your mission and your why. Like, why do we exist? Where are we going in the next 3 years? If you can think that far ahead. Nowadays, it's like a year out at best. But that's the first conversation you really need to have with people and just reminding them that nonprofit work is hard work. It's hard work because we are here to serve others every single day. And as a leader, it's our role to serve the people that are working in the organization. And that means that we are having conversations with them about how well they're doing or some of the things that they could do better or what kind of obstacles should I be removing from your path so that you can be more effective as a team member. So we have to really be thoughtful as leaders so that we can give that feedback to individuals in a kind and also very honest way.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you why do your clients bring you on board? What are they trying to accomplish when they bring you on board?
Yeah, so we actually serve as a fractional HR department. So we are a virtual team of HR professionals and we serve as the HR department for our clients. So what does that mean? That means that we're fielding employee questions. If they can't find their dental card or I don't remember what insurance I signed up for, we're able to gather that information for them and keep leaders out of having to have those conversations. We are managing their performance management processes. And in some instances, we are creating them. We help with open enrollment, and in some instances, we are helping to implement a new insurance plan or new insurance policy. Um, what else? We help leaders navigate difficult conversations. We support them when it comes to behavioral challenges. I have a client now that is navigating an accommodation request where someone has a disability and they have requested some accommodations. We develop onboarding processes. We also manage the onboarding processes. So we are a full service HR department with the exception of recruiting. We don't do recruiting because that, I'm sure you all know, takes so much time. We would have no time to do the actual HR work. We don't fire people and we do not run payroll.
Gotcha. And within the last year, is there any trends that you've seen in regards to HR or questions that have been asked or things that have been different than in prior years that you've noticed?
I think the one thing that comes to mind is the how the government has changed the laws around who can be a contractor and who is an employee. And so they've become more strict as it relates to those classifications. So I I think it's really important for leaders, nonprofit leaders, to ensure that people are classified appropriately. So if you have contractors or 1099ers, we want to make sure that the work that they're doing is truly classified the way that it should be. And there's so many nuances that it would be really difficult for me to even really go into detail about it right here. But
Mhm.
that's something that is really important for leaders to pay attention to. Also, the law as it relates to the minimum annual salary for a person that you are classifying as non exempt. So I'm sorry, as exempt. So if a person, if you're saying that this person is not entitled to overtime pay because they are a manager, then they have to make a minimum amount of money every year. So those thresholds are continuing to increase. So we want to make sure that our salaries are correct. And so that's a quick audit that each leader can do on their own. That's not something that you need an outsider to do for you.
Yeah, and I going back to that 1099 issue, I do have some experience in that uh, quite some time ago, and I do want to emphasize to our listeners that it is a very serious matter because if you do get audited, they come in and they look at this, you could run into the issue where they're going to ask you to come back and make um, a lot of back payments and payroll taxes. It could be extremely serious, and so don't and there's a lot of rules in regards to it. There used to be called the 20 rules. I don't know if that's still the case. It might be more, but one of the most important things to look at is if you have an employee who's working for you 40 hours a week and is not really working for anybody else, uh, and you're putting them as a 1099 person, that is not that's not the right classification. And, that the number one thing is they have to be working for other people too,
Mhm.
as well. And and I mean, it's been a while since I've looked at this, Tiffany, but is that a good guideline?
That's a good guideline. And the other caveat I would say is so here's how I keep it simple. In order for you to classify as a 1099er, if you're working for HR Tailor Made, you have to own a business. That's how I keep it simple. It just, then there is no conversation because I
Yep.
have essentially employed a company instead
Yep.
of this
Fair
individual
enough.
person.
Yeah,
So,
fair enough.
yes.
Um, so let's go back to the topic, which is having difficult conversations
Mhm.
with having conversations with people that could be difficult, right? Um, Tell us some recommendations of what you've seen about preparing, getting involved in those conversations, pitfalls, all the areas that you've seen.
Yeah. Well, the easiest or most useful thing that I think I could leave your audience with is when you need to have a difficult conversation, prepare for it as much as you can. Sometimes you have to have them on the cuff. I get it. But if there's a situation where you know that you need to have a difficult conversation, you want to prepare for it. I create an outline of the things that I want to discuss with that person. I also look to see if I've had previous conversations or email communication with that person about the same thing. I make sure that I pull that information, have the date. And, we talked about this on November 11th of last year. We also discussed it on March 7th. And then here we are again having the same conversation. So the outline is very helpful in having the resource available to you related to previous conversations. I think is a really good way of helping you to stay on task. We have some people on our teams that are really good at changing the subject. So, having an outline of what you want to talk about helps you to stay focused and allows you to remember where you left off so that you can get your point across. The other thing that's important about difficult conversations is to be clear about what the problem is. What is the problem? What did you observe? And if there is a policy associated with that, I would say this was, in violation of this particular policy. And I would leave them with what I expect them to do differently. That's very important. And obviously, you want to document it. It's as simple as sending an email as a follow up to the conversation, where you're basically outlining the conversation that you had with them. And it should be very easy because you will have outlined what you wanted to say to them anyway. And you can use that as a guide for your follow up email.
Yeah, the other thing I'd add as well is if somebody hits you up with something out of the blue and they
Hmm.
do it personally,
Hmm.
it's okay to say to somebody, um, let me think about what you said, and is it okay if I get back to you first thing tomorrow morning? You know, give yourself some space because the one of the biggest issues often people have is, and I'm talking about myself, is taking out the emotional component in what has happened. And if I find that if in my case, if I'm going to have to give feedback, I know that I need to be non-emotional about it. And in my case, I need to make sure I pick my words correctly. So, that's just something I've learned over the years
Hmm.
to not get emotional about it. And by the way, I use that both with my work life and my personal life too.
Hmm.
It kind of because you don't want to make the situation worse, right? So um, have you seen any good books in regards to this?
Um, I honestly have not looked for any.
Mm.
So,
Oh,
this I've been doing HR for almost 30 years now. So, difficult conversations, that's a way of life for us, right? So I haven't looked for any. One of the books that I've been told about that might be helpful is The Coaching Habit.
mm.
Because that book, from what I understand, and I actually have it, but have not started reading it, but that book is supposed to help you um, discover ways of coaching your team members or coaching others. And as leaders, that's what we have to do with people. Sometimes we have to coach them. I want to go back to something that you said. Darn, you just said it, and I just lost. My train of thought. Oh, you said that you need to remove emotion when you're having the conversations. That is so true. Because what we don't want to do is have a knee jerk reaction to something that that employee is saying to us. So I recommend before having the conversation with them that you have that conversation with someone else. So if you have a colleague that you can talk to, an HR person that you can talk to, and just discuss the situation with them, they will be able to pick up on in your tone and the way that you're discussing it with them if you're still emotional about that particular thing. And so, what we do very well is to tell our clients, okay, you might want to give it a little space before you have that conversation with them, because I can tell that this situation is still a little raw for you and it is still impacting you in ways that we don't want to come across in your conversation with that person.
Yeah, I agree. I think that one little thing, let me get back to you. See, the issue you have is that leaders nowadays they're not just leading. They're especially, let's face it, unless if you're under $15 million in revenue or $10 million in revenue, you're still doing a lot of things. And all of a sudden you have other priorities. And then what happens is the people part of it, kind of throws you for a loop. And then you got to change gears so quickly. And for me, I'm working on a lot of different projects. Having someone come into my office to talk to me about something serious my mind is elsewhere. you know,
Yes.
and I'm like, oh geez, can you give me a break because I got this other problem I'm dealing with, right? And
Hmm.
so that's why I've learned to give someone, because they deserve my undivided attention, honestly.
Yes.
So that's kind of what I've learned over a period of time. I've said this in another podcast. I was never a good manager. I became a good manager because I worked at it,
Yeah.
right? And there's three different roles at companies. There is the leader, there's the manager, and there's the worker bee, right? And unfortunately, often with smaller organizations, the owner, the executive director, is doing all three of those things at once, and
Yeah.
that's where the challenge comes into play. When you start getting that's one of the reasons why what Tiffany does as an HR person outsourcing helps, because you can kind of get that off your plate a little bit, and you don't
Hmm.
need to be doing that. So I think it is a very good idea. We did quite a bit of outsourcing in different roles,
Hmm.
um, and it always worked out very well for us.
Yeah.
So anything to add to that, Tiffany?
No, I agree with you. I think that, especially in the space of HR for nonprofits, you don't have time to chase down all of the employment laws. So, having someone in your team who is aware of the laws and keeping up with all of the changes is super helpful. And also, it's lonely being at the boss. It's very, very lonely. So, having an HR partner that you can chat with about the things that are stressful and difficult, and talking to someone that you feel comfortable with and that you can be vulnerable with is so helpful. And knowing that that person is not inside of your organization and that that conversation that you have with them is going to stay with them, I think for a lot of people takes a really heavy burden off of their shoulders.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you this and circle back. A lot of people who are in my generation say that the kids nowadays, we talked about it earlier, um, that they've been told their whole lives how good they are. I haven't had that experience with my kids, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
But do you think that I mean, this whole idea about participation trophies,
Mhm.
honestly, that happened. I was a coach for a long time, not a business coach, a sports coach in many different sports. that only happened until somebody was 5 years old.
Hmm.
And then after that, they didn't get participation trophies anymore. So, like my friends who don't have kids, they think that's a big deal that the kids all got participation trophies. And they're thinking it happened until they're 18 years old. And it didn't only happen until they're five. Uh, you know, so, but having said that, do you think that the truth is that kids are not, the younger generation is, they don't like hearing criticism?
I think there is a subset that don't like hearing criticism, and that is no different than people that are our age. There are some people that are, in their 50s and 60s that don't want to hear the truth. Um, so I don't know that that's uncommon. It definitely feels like it's overwhelming right now. And I just think that there are some in this generation that are not well prepared for adulthood. And we find ourselves in the workplace having to provide them with additional supports that I don't think that people of our generation needed.
Yep.
I could be way off, but that is definitely what I'm seeing. A little more hand holding. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. What we want to make sure of, though, is that we are not providing the hand holding as it relates to them actually performing the work. So if we need to hold their hand a little bit more when it comes to helping them understand their benefits, okay, no problem. Let's do that. If we need to help them understand how to navigate having difficult conversations. Okay, that makes sense. We can do that. But if I need to hold their hand and give them 2 additional months to learn how to do their job, when a normal person, they're all normal, but when an average person may only take 3 months to learn the job, then that is entirely different. So we just want to make sure that whoever we hire for the job can actually do the work that they were hired to do. All of the other things that are on the peripheral of the position, we can help with that. We can provide them with the support for that. But we need the people on our teams who can do the work and won't pull us down or hold us back as it relates to getting things done. We can deal with that for a little bit. We can provide them with the support that they need to get up to speed, but that's not something that we have the ability or that um, we have the luxury of doing for a long period of time.
Yeah, it's really good comment. I think, part of the problem too, these difficult conversations is that, employees nowadays have a lot of options. It wasn't like it was, 25 years ago where you didn't really leave a company very often. You stayed there. And so I think, now kind of someone puts the resume up, they could conceivably get a job the very next day. And that makes the feedback that you give to people have to be more professional and in a certain way. And I think that's what makes it a challenging environment. So it was a great conversation. It's really all the time we have today. I'd like to thank so very much Tiffany Slater from HR TaylorMade for coming on to today's podcast. And if you like today's podcast or any of the other ones, please feel free to share it with a friend and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. The Nonprofit MBA podcast has so many fantastic guests like Tiffany on it. And, it's really a how-to on how to run a nonprofit. And, there's a lot of great comments that are usually made. Also, if you could give us a 5-star rating, we greatly appreciate it. We're already the number one most listened to podcast, but those ratings really help us. And if you're looking for a line of credit, please feel free to visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Tiffany, if anyone wants to reach out to you to get a hold of you, how would they go about doing that?
They can email us at support@hrtailormade.com.
Great. Thanks, Tiffany.
Thank you.
So I want to thank our listeners, not really just for listening, but more so for making the world a better place. I know Tiffany and I are doing our parts in our own way, but you guys are out there on the front lines every single day, you know, 80, 90 hours a week, trying to make this world a better place. We need you to do that. There's a lot of issues that are going on. But I just want to remind you that you're no good to your employees, you're no good to your cause, you're no good to your family if you don't take care of yourself first. And you know what that means, rather it be a good night's sleep, rather that be taking time out of your day to go do what you like to do, exercise, walk, meditate, pray, whatever it is. You need to think of yourself first every single day, and then you can think about everybody else after that. So other than that, I want to thank you for listening to the Nonprofit MBA podcast. And I really wish that everybody has a fantastic day.